Practical and Tactical group on Facebook. You're going to get a super secret link where you can actually come on screen, meet Sarah. Networking is going to be a key component of this episode, and ask her a question yourself. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the Prime People Podcast, where we cover all things that got us to where we are today, our team building strategies, the marketing and sales tips that we've learned through thousands of transactions, productivity tips, ways to really just hold yourself accountable to accomplishing what you want to accomplish, and all things content creation, personal development, and not to mention we have some of the best guests on the planet. We certainly do. And today we have Sarah. How are you?
Good. How are you, Justin?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me clearly? I just want to make sure all of the technology is working well.
It is working.
That's awesome. So yeah, we've spent some time together recently. You had me on the Read Club, which was that investment platform I was speaking about. So let's jump right into that first. Like, what sparked your idea to start, the Right Club? I think I pronounced it the Read Club, but you can correct me and then explain to me how you got started there.
It is the Right Club. And we got started 4 years ago when we realized there was a need for people meeting up in Burlington, of all places. There's lots of meetups everywhere. And that's how we got started. And then it evolved from there. But originally it was Burlington specific. And our first event, I think we had about 100 people. We had been networking, connecting, and it grew from there. I think the second and third were a little bit less people, but since then, right before the pandemic, when we were still able to meet, we had about 350 in attendance in a room. And it's just about providing real estate education, content, value, networking, all that good stuff. And then when things went virtual, then we actually expanded throughout Canada. And it's just about giving back. It's a small community. I think we're all like 1 degree of separation from each other. Let's work together. Let's help each other.
That's amazing. And that's so key. I mean, I'm going to dig in a second and ask you kind of what sparked that networking interest. For the guests that are here, I see you, my boy, Matt LaMarche. Hey, Matt's in the ATL. I think of him, I think of real estate and Porsches, but he's also one of the smartest guys in the business. I also want to there's 2 other people here that are also waving, letting us know they're there. I will jump into the Facebook group in a minute, but if you're on this stream, just hit the link that I just dropped. That will allow Facebook to see who you are and allow your profile to be seen on the live stream. Because one of the coolest things, I bet you when Sarah sees your name and who you are down the road, if there is a synergy and a collaboration, she's the type of person to make that happen. So, your interest in real estate investing in that initial networking piece before the Right Club, where did that spark come from? And why were you looking at real estate as that vehicle to give you freedom?
Yeah. So I guess there's 2 questions. I'll answer your second one first in terms of the real estate and why real estate. I just always wanted to know that I wanted to retire early. I wanted to become wealthy. And I knew that it wasn't just from working the 9 to 5. So I ended up it was literally on my Saturdays off, Googling, how do people become wealthy? How do you, create wealth? How do you retire early? Businesses and stocks, and then real estate kept coming back over. And I'm like, okay, well, I could probably dabble in the stock thing, see how that is. And starting a business sounds like a lot of work. And I wanted to do this while I was still working. And so I started really figuring out that it might be real estate. Most millionaires are made from real estate investing. And then I started listening to some podcasts, didn't have the knowledge that there were real estate groups or meetups back then, but really just listen to Bigger Pockets of all places. Very American, so there's a lot of differences. And then over time, I realized that it was the way to do it as I was acquiring more properties, tweaking my strategies to be able to retire. And it took 7 years. 2020, October 1st was the leaving the job world forever. You can call it retirement, but there's still things going on. I'm still doing things. I can't just put my feet up forever. And so that's why real estate. What was your other question?
Well, no. So I'm going to expand on what you just said, right? Because you caught a bug early on. The beginning was how long ago? Like how many years?
So the first rental was 2013.
2013. You started getting educated. And what is the thing that you just announced recently? What's that big project that you're working on?
The big project, the resort?
Yes,
the resort. So, actually, since I left, it's funny because opportunities come when you have time. And I did not have time. I'll tell you, it was a lot of sacrifices in the beginning of doing this in conjunction with having a full-time job. But before I started, with all of this, I actually had 2 jobs, and I was cashing out my commissions to get. So there were sacrifices made along the way.
Sure.
But I'll tell you, they were well worth it. And 7 years later, here I am. But when you have more time, you have more time for different opportunities. You have more time to figure out, okay, what are your next goals? I was so focused on retiring from the job world, and then I'm like, okay, now I have to have, new goals. I have to have new projects. And so I ended up starting, in some development, bought some land. And this was the third piece that we purchased. And I have a great connection, a great friend who is a mentor to me as well, has been developing for 30 years, as well as the builder there on the team. So we partnered together. We are going to create a themed adults upscale resort. Each cottage is going to have its own theme, and that is in the Kawarthas. We are good for like 15 plus cottages. So we're going to do a few every year and just create something completely different than any other resort out there in Canada.
I love it. And the reason I asked you that question is that's not a very long time, right? If you think 2013 to now, and you're launching a resort in the Kawarthas, and you have these people that you're partnered with, the one thing that I found interesting is that I held your events and I'd see you in proximity to people that I know. The time you're spending with them isn't like, oh, what can I get from you right now? It's really collaborative as a community. And you talk about, you're in a job right now making money, or you were in a job. The exit of the job isn't an exit from work and productivity. I truly think, hard work really destroys hard times. You're too tired to even worry about all the bad things going on because you work hard and you create things, and you look back and you're like, oh man, I did that. And it's okay, what's next? Not just sitting back and putting your feet up and saying, okay, now I'm just going to relax for the rest of my life. You are like, what else can I create? Can I build an Amazon building? Like, people are doing it, right? And these are things that are happening, and you identified that early on. So for the audience, I really wanted you to understand that piece, that she started with one thing and then went to the next and went to the next. Where did you go and source the information? Because I know you said you went to Bigger Pockets and you started networking. That becomes so overwhelming because there's so many people that they know their niche or the way that they're doing it, or there's so many fake life coaches out there. How did you kind of cut through the weeds and find the information that you were able to apply?
So when I first started, to be honest, it was trial and error, and it actually was books and podcasts. And I'll say one of the things that I think has worked in my favor is I've always been the ready, fire, aim person, and figuring out,
Sure,
like what's the worst that can happen. And I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. Had I hired a coach, probably I would have, made less mistakes. But I think it's part of learning, and you can learn by reading, you can learn by hearing. But I'll tell you, learning by doing, you actually will learn so much more. And then just over time, I just loved it that I started having conversations. I, listened to more podcasts. I went to lots of other networking events just to, really just like, I want to say live and breathe real estate investing. And, to the extent that it kind of like maybe takes a little bit of time to learn it all, and you take action along the way, and then you learn from all the action and you kind of piece it together. I think over time you realize, wow, I've learned so much by doing, a little bit every single day. Life will get in the way. What can you drive to work while you're listening to a podcast? Can you start networking by, like driving back home? You're the 5 people that you hang out with most as an average, right? And so, changing that over the years as well has helped. Now, from a development standpoint, I'll tell you that the risks and the rewards can be a lot greater on both sides. And so I would prefer, just because it's a whole different ballgame, to partner with people that have been doing it for a long, long time in very similar areas, have a lot of those connections already. And the builder is part of the team. So if you can imagine, we're not hiring a builder. He's actually internal. And so, the cost of doing these is definitely a lot more beneficial to our advantage. And
not only that, on that note, think of like his equity being one of the reasons why he's doing the project. You're getting a very different outcome from somebody that owns part of the company than somebody that's just coming in and just doing the work for a paycheck, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the fun part just now is that, I can be creative, and I can also be selective in what I say yes to, the projects I do, the projects I don't do. And I think part of it, for the listeners here as well is, everybody talks about number of properties and growing and I don't think that's as important as what your portfolio can do for you. So here's an example. Could I have, scaled 3 times as fast with joint ventures? Sure. But the fact that I have one joint venture partner that I did a cottage purchase after I left my job. But until then, it was my properties with my spouse. And I'll tell you, there's a lot more control. There's a lot, you're not spending cash flow. You can refinance. You have more control to do what you need. And I think that helped me be able to leave my 9 to 5 because I had these, amassed a portfolio that was 100% mine to do what I wanted with. I think first and foremost that helped, but could I have grown twice as big? Sure. But I'll tell you, it's not about the number of properties, but what your portfolio can do for you. Is your property cash flowing? Because I talked to a lot of people and they're buying these properties and they're, every property is negative 400. Well, how are you going to leave your job if your job is now having to support your rental properties? So it was always, cash flow first. It's not all about cash flow, but cash flow first, because I want to make sure that I can leave and I'm not having to cover my rental costs from, the tenant should cover that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I'm thinking of the dynamic of the Right Club as well as you're building that. You can grow organizations for the clout and to be famous and just the numbers and the measuring stick that people use in real estate investing. It's comical to a certain degree when you get around that world. And the first thing they're saying is that how many doors, how many units. And I'm like, well, the real players that I know aren't really measuring their success by those metrics. And you start peeking behind the curtain and realizing it's like, well, what can this vehicle do for me? I said this to you on your podcast, right? You're asking me about the type of investing that I do. We don't do JVs. And I've had people on my podcast that do them and we break them down and we work with a lot of people that do JVs because they love that. Everybody's built very differently. My wife and I like having 100% control. We like very passive investments. We have things that we're doing here that are completely out to left field, but they require our attention. And that's where our investment is. But the real estate world is the same, where you'll see agents that measure their value based on the number of units they sell. But I'm like, okay, so you're the number one agent in the number one market because everybody at your firm runs their sales under your name, even though you're not doing those sales. And the consumers know that. But also each one of those deals, how much more value did you bring to that consumer? Like, did you actually bring them what they paid you and then some, or did you just get a quick sale and actually cost them money when they could have got more? So talking quality of work, balancing that lifestyle that you're explaining, how did you do that? Like, how did you manage being in a job, building a portfolio, networking, and building a group? Do you time block? Like, what's the secret sauce in Sarah's world to keep yourself organized?
I'll tell you, okay, so there's a couple things that I've always, thought is I'm a master delegator, and what I can delegate, I will delegate. And done is better than perfect. I'm not a perfectionist. I just want to take action. I'll fix it along the way. I think that's helped me a lot. But I'll tell you, it is tough. Some days and some weeks I was working a lot to get to that end goal. And I didn't have a whole lot of time, but I hired a chef that does the groceries. She comes once a week. She cooks, and we've had her for the last 3 years.
That's super key, right? You think at the time that's saving you even going to the grocery store and cooking. Yeah.
So like any of the chores, like anything that is not conducive to me developing and growing and to my goals, I would hire out. Like even just car detailing, like they would come to me, changing the car tires. There's a company for that. There's a lot of people that come to you and that are very mobile. Even our RMT, he moved away just recently, but he was coming to us. We got 90-minute massages. He brought everything. So just little things like that you're like, okay, rather than you wasting the time to drive there and sit in traffic or something, can you have the service come to you? And that's what I love spending money on is other people's services to make my life easier. I just recently hired an assistant. I have some VAs. And so, I can work on either stuff that I enjoy doing, for my health and my wellness, or I can work on the bigger stuff in my business. So, but I will tell you, there is going to be a time as you're getting, to the other side that is a grind. And, there are going to be some days that you're going to be working, 20 hours, 16 hours, like for how long? I don't think it's going to take forever, but it is the reality.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So there are a few things. So what's up, Udelka? I see you in the comments. Very nice to see you. And Natty Alcon said Instacart is her best friend. This is Natalie. I see both your names. I did drop the StreamYard link into the Practical and Tactical group. If anybody wants to jump on, feel free to click that link. You can come on the actual podcast and introduce yourself in person. Udelka is a killer in the insurance world, actually down in the States. You touched on a couple things, Sarah, and I'm going to rewatch this episode myself with my wife and then take probably this one segment and then write down everything you said, because spending money is actually making you money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like probably at the point now where you can't afford not to have those conveniences and those people coming to you, because focused effort is everything. I've noticed people are always 1,000 tabs open on their screen. They're talking to you. They're looking at their phone. They're not present. They're doing different things. It's so hard for you to actually get anything done because your brain is constantly switching modes. So does Sarah have a brain mode for Sarah's personal brand, the right club, the business, and how do you switch those modes? And I guess compartmentalize it and take your notes and track everything you're doing in those worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I love the gym. I schedule that and then I schedule my stuff around it. I love just like, meeting my friends for lunch. So I actually schedule my social stuff first. I try to do a lighter, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I do not do anything from like May 24 to September, after Labor Day. So I like anything that involves any meetings, webinars, podcasts, I don't do. But other than that, like it is important for me to time block. So like, for example, like I have podcasts I record, that's Monday afternoon.
Sure.
The Right Club stuff is on Tuesdays. And a lot of our Right Club meetings, I'll tell you, yes, there's 4 founders, but we have staff that do a lot of the background and the organizing.
Francois is amazing. He actually sent me an email the other day. You are a master delegator, and he's a good representation of your brand, and we'll talk about that in a second. But continue.
Yeah. So there's, certain days and certain time slots that we've scheduled for those kinds of meetings. And then, just in terms of things for my students, like I started a new course, there's 15 students. I capped it at 15, and ahead of time, here is the schedule. So I know, 6 months in advance what I'm doing, but to me, it's important to time block, but I think it's important to time block the same amount, for your fitness, for your fun, your socializing, your family time. And so that goes into my calendar as well. But I'll tell you, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I try to do, the bulk of the office stuff. And then moving forward after that, I just, enjoy some social time or whatnot. I'm not saying I don't work during those days, but I try to, narrow it down as much as possible.
2 key points, and we are more similar than we are different, because when I talk to people about time blocking or productivity, and I'm like, take your year, I always say that the structure that I like to lead with is faith, fitness, family, fun, then finances. And finances being last sounds very confusing, but I'm like, well, if I got my spiritual life right and I'm in a good health and I have energy and I take care of my family, I'm usually in a good spot. If I'm not, there in a good fitness perspective, I'm not going to be able to take care of my wife and my daughter. But, then the fun piece comes in. If I'm not putting in things I enjoy, I'm going to hate my work because I can't do the things I actually enjoy. So I like how you structured that. Another point I want people to really notice that you just said was looking at your calendar and saying, well, no, this is the day that I do that. Thursday is media day at Prime, right? So we have the team, the graphic designers out there, they're doing a brand consultation with one of the agents. They're setting up for reels and content and all that stuff. We're doing this, we do our podcast. And I can tell you the freedom it's given me to know that, I'm wearing this hat today is something that has given me a lot of freedom to be in my best self and not feel like I'm falling forward. But before this, I had a beautiful listing and I had a showing pop up and I'm there for the active business. I don't hit this schedule 100% of the time. I think people get this misconception. You have to have this rigid structure. And if you tweak it, you die. I would argue the discipline equals freedom, because I could do that showing, sell that property, and maybe I'm behind a little bit, but as long as I'm hitting it like 60% of the time, I'm still better than most people. So what are your thoughts around being adaptable or fluid, given you do have a structure?
I mean, it's Thursday today and I said yes to your show. So
I guess so. Thank you.
There's definitely some need to be flexible, but I think ultimately, like, you still have to say, okay, like, we're doing this real estate stuff, or we're doing whatever it is that you guys are doing to get to, having a life that you want on your terms. And so I think that's just important. But yeah, there is going to be some flexibility. I am, less flexible in the summer. I invite my friends over to the cottage and we just have, lots of great food, or chef comes and makes, a nice meal. And, it's kind of like a revolving door of people coming in and out, which I love. I think it's fun, but there definitely needs to be some flexibility. I mean, like, ultimately you have to say yes and you have to say no to the opportunities that make sense. If something, and I look at what I say yes to and what I say no to, if it goes with my goals or what I'm trying to accomplish or it can fit in there, let's take the opportunity and say yes to it. But if it's something that's going to take away and take my time, I think that's a thing is, as you are growing and you're further along, there's going to be people are going to pull you in so many directions that want to do this, that want to do that. And you've got to just kind of stay centered. Like, is it worth your time? Is it going to be bringing value to other people? Is it part of your goals? And saying no is okay.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it can be a struggle sometimes, especially as you're growing, right? Because, somebody helped you out and you got through those stages and you want to turn around and help everybody, but then you're going to get hit up at all hours of the day, at all hours of the night. Oh, can we just hop on a 5-minute phone call that turns into a 45-minute phone call that really, does suck your energy? And I think when I look at, say, yourself or even myself, and I'm going through my DMs and I'm seeing the names that pop up, quite often I am willing to always give 5 minutes of my time, 10, 15 minutes if you're willing to come in and actually meet with me in person. And then I'm going to watch and see how much are you doing for your community, right? I do find that, I have a tendency and a soft spot for people that I see being unselfish and really living out, trying to help other people. I'll usually give them a little bit more. And the ones that I find have fire, I'll try and really pour into. But then the ones that I see are really just out for their own ambitions and they're just using people and jumping from person to person to person. I kind of shut that door quickly. How do you identify people with passion and maybe those people that you bring into your ecosystem? It doesn't matter if it's a partner, a staff member. What is your way of finding people that fit your world?
I mean, I think that's a good question. So one of the things I will say, because I do get a lot of emails from my podcast, right? I'm happy to answer any question. Like if somebody's writing, and they want like a couple things answered, I have no problem doing that. But if they're like, hey, I want to talk to you for a half an hour and ask you like these 30 questions, again, if it's just out of the blue, I may just say, hey, can you narrow it down a couple questions? But I'll tell you, like, for what I'm looking for, like, for example, like Aisha, like I hired her as my assistant. I had lots of people that applied. I literally put a story up on Instagram about it. But I'm looking for someone that is trainable, that has grit, that has the drive, the determination, the motivation, that has goals. And I think the rest is so easy to train, right? And so anybody in my circle as well, as for, those who are looking to have a coffee, again, right? Like, it's just, I have to still be careful with what I say yes to or no. I'm definitely in different meetups or different things like that. But I think it's over time too. Like, I don't know if you're going to get that response from the first time you're necessarily talking to somebody, but if they're continuing to provide, I don't know, some insights, or we're having that conversation, like, those, I think over time it grows into an opportunity to get to know each other better. And I
do think, sorry to cut you off, but I've seen people do it in your position where, like, if we flip the case study over to you and your mentors, you probably built trust before you got access, I'm assuming, right? Yeah. And how did you build that trust?
I mean, with the mentors that I have now, it was actually, I had them on my podcast, and I'm like, hey, do you want to speak? And, and speak at the right club. And I liked their value and I liked what they were giving back. And just out of the blue, I'm like, hey, like, I don't know if you do this or not, but like, I'd love to, like, even just learn from you. I'm willing to pay for it. Sure. I don't expect people to do it for free. And then just over time, it develops into some really cool opportunities. And, like, for example, Harry James, who's my mentor, when I found a piece of property, I'm like, hey, why don't you just come in this deal with me? And, let's do it together, and in return, he had a couple other projects and he brought me in, and, and here we are with the resort as well. So I think it's organic. I think it's over time. I don't think it's going to be, somebody calling and say, hey, can you coach me? Can you mentor me? It's got to grow organically. I mean, obviously somebody can just, pay for the time, but if you're looking for that longer term mentorship opportunity, put in some deposits, right? Or, for him, as an example, it was just being able to get out there a little bit more and showcase, what his beliefs are in life and all that good stuff. And I'm like, if I could give you some more platforms, it just happens organic. And I don't think you can force something like that.
Yeah, there's such an inherent value in that too, right? And it's interesting because you look at somebody like him that was so successful, yet comes into a new space like podcasting where, be twice removed. I'm sure I've got some connections that would have them on their platforms, and you just never know where the relationships can go. You also pointed something out that I think is very intelligent, and putting parameters around the relationship. Right. I remember when I found one of my mentors, they didn't do mentoring. They didn't do coaching. I was going to hire like a standard coach. And I was in a cab in New York City, and I messaged my wife. I'm like, you cool if I just offer this to the other guy and say, hey, like 1 hour a year, I'm good with that. And I'll value your time, and I won't bug you. I won't become a psychopath and email you every week.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, they didn't actually do that at that time, but it was about a year process. I kind of just kept up with the engagement, figured out some things they were struggling with. Like, we were really good at the back end systems processes. So I just literally, I remember what I did. I copied all of my systems into a document and sent it to his assistant. I'm like, here you go. Like, here's everything that, every step-by-step drip campaign, the different things that we had, have fun, never asked for anything. And then 4 years later, everything's changed. Right. So I guess, what are you working on next? Cause I know you're working on the resort development. You're doing stuff in the Kawarthas, the Right Club. Personally, what is, I guess, your core business competency that you're really still pouring a lot into the foundation of? And I guess, where are you trying to learn and grow as a person?
I mean, I think right now I'm rebranding to Sarah Larbi Developments, and the development side is likely going to be a bigger piece for the next few years, and finding more deals and making deals happen, and providing, like, I think a lot of developers are out there creating stuff for just the regular home buyer, right? And so what makes sense from a cash flow perspective for investors, how to give them more opportunities. I think deals are harder to find these days. So that's likely where, the next part of my journey will go into. The resort, of course, I think that is going to be a ton of fun. We're going to be doing some retreats, like real estate investing retreats, and yoga and wine, and just, create something fun with it. I think that's the fun project. Everyone needs a fun project. And, really ultimately the next part is, my spouse is still working. So just working on retiring him. And in really being free, so that I don't need to spend, the winters here, and I could be a snowbird. So that's likely, the thing that we're focusing on in the next, 12 to 24 months there.
Key. And you mentioned earlier, a master at delegation. So pretend I am a 5th grader and I'm coming to you saying, hey, Sarah, can you give me a crash course in proper delegation? What have you learned? Best practices, things you would have done differently? Just give it to me straight.
Yeah, I mean, great question. So I think for me, it's like, if I don't enjoy doing it and it takes time, and I could do something more fun or more efficient, doing something else with my time, then, who can I delegate to? So like things like paperwork, I hate paperwork. I don't enjoy, any bookkeeping tasks. Like that's a big one on my list. So, if you enjoy cooking, by all means cook. For us, it was a situation where we were doing a lot of like skip the dishes back then, or like just, ordering from different places. Or it was a conversation like, what do you want to eat? Oh, I don't know. What do you want to eat? And then it was going on. And then it's like half an hour of cooking, and then you got to clean up. It's just so much easier. Like, and neither of us enjoyed doing that. So we delegated that. And then, gardening, I don't like to garden. So who can do that? It's just that I would just say, put things in the bucket that take time, that you don't enjoy doing. And if you had the time, you do something better with it. And if you have a list of 10 things, I'll tell you, there's going to be somebody that you can pay, especially now. There's a lot of people that are looking for work, and especially under the table work. I mean, if you're paying them and they can, for example, like my chef, like, yeah, she's under the table. So it is what it is. But, put those in buckets, and then figure out who you can outsource. And maybe it's an assistant as well, right?
I think it'd be interesting if you found somebody too that wanted to be in your space, that had a skill set. So maybe you're somebody watching this that's an amazing chef, would be a great personal assistant, and wants to get around somebody that has a level of competency in a subject matter and is doing things. And I mean, imagine being in that room as you're prepping, and you're probably walking around the kitchen having phone conversations when it comes to real estate developments, talking with their husband about organizational structure and all those things. And just to be a fly on the wall. I mean, a lot of people would pay a lot of money to be there, let alone you could potentially get paid. So if you're skilled in any capacity, hit Sarah up. I think she's looking for an RMT, as she said earlier. My girl, Udelka, there you go. You got your profile working. Where are you from, Sarah? I was so excited about this episode. I didn't even mention where you were based out of.
I live in Canada, so in Oakville, Ontario. And in the summer in Lakefield, Ontario at the cottage.
That is amazing. Trust me, it is beautiful up here, Udelka, and I will get you up here for a super summit one day. And we had another user, forming habits on outcomes are not going to learn to form habits on identity, but it's a hustle. That's a very interesting comment. Yeah, identity has been something I've worked through. I mean, I remember I used to be a guy that just wanted to get a friggin' sale done because I had a really hard time my first 6 months, and then I wanted to take over a neighborhood, now the world. How have you battled with identity versus outcome?
I mean, so can you expand like a little bit of that?
So I think what she's saying in this question is a lot of people just form a habit based on an outcome, right? I want to quit smoking because X versus saying on identity, which would be I'm not a smoker anymore, right? So I think some investors will come in saying I want to buy 5 houses because it will give me the cash flow versus saying I'm now a real estate developer or investor. Did you ever have that touch point or have to make a shift, or were you always very clear on your identity?
I mean, I think once I had the one real estate investment property, I started calling myself an investor. But you know, for sure, over time, the more that you do, the more comfortable you're going to be. Um, you know, it probably comes down to mindset ultimately at the end of the day, and what your goals are. But day in, day out, you know, I think just have fun with it. You know, don't overthink it. I don't know if that's the right answer or not, but
No, it's one thing I'm noticing as you're speaking to about the education and the mentorship piece and everything else. I think your identity is coming from a lot of the mindset piece, right? Where you're constantly thinking about and ideating and looking at what traits other successful people have. Do you have those traits? Are they traits that you can build or delegate? And you do have some clarity around that. Udelk was also asking if you have little ones. I don't. Oh, sorry. If you had any kids was her next question. And then if you
no,
do,
I don't.
no. Okay, perfect. Udelka has some cute little ones as well too. So I guess the delegation piece, going back to that, right? So finding people and delegating things that you don't want. How do you take the time to actually find those people? Because people are so busy, their calendar's already full, and they're like, man, I gotta hire somebody to do that for me. Is it just being radically like, nope, this is happening, and making that a priority, or how did you make that first jump into delegating?
Yeah, I mean, I think the same way that you might find a contractor, you know, you're going to ask others, see what they do, and, you know, see who they recommend. So for many people, ironically, though, I did find my chef on Kijiji.
Yeah, there you go.
And it worked out the first time, but I've referred her to a few others, and I know there's some investors that are also, you know, eating her food and she's cooking for them. But I think word of mouth, and it's just a matter of like asking others. Like I literally had a conversation. I spent the day with, you know, a developer that's very successful, and he had a driver. And he had like, he was like on a whole other level of delegating, where he had different properties in different areas that he was developing. And he had a whole wardrobe there with clothes and everything. So he didn't even have to pack and worry about that. So like, you know, it just depends on the level that you want to go, but definitely asking others, you know, we like to share, right? And if we can reference or refer somebody that is successful and doing a good job for us, you know, again, it's up to them. Like my chef won't do anything outside of Oakville, but I've, you know, offered her number to many others that, you know, she just has to say yes or no herself. You know, and I think it's also a matter of like, if it doesn't work, just don't be scared to fire quickly, right? I had a VA, you know, before I found my 2 other VAs that didn't work. And unfortunately we had to replace her. So, you know, hire and, you know, like over time, you build the trust, you build the relationships. And if it doesn't work out, then it just doesn't work out. You've got to find a new one.
Yeah. And I'm never wrapped up in those types of things too, right? Like you find people, you work together, fantastic. I mean, people and even partners, whether it be investors or anybody else you're working with, you may be in alignment for a season. Sometimes you can go through a season, then realize the alignment's not there. And some people, it will devastate them and stop them in their tracks. I think it's the greatest thing that ever happened, because eventually you're going to find out you're not in alignment anyways. So I think it's an opportunity to sit back and look at your systems and be like, oh, wow, okay, there's a bunch of holes here. Maybe that person wasn't the right person for the seat. What do you do when you come up against that type of adversity, though? Because not everybody reacts super well to that.
Yeah. I mean, so I was a sales manager for, you know, prior as a job. So I hired and I let a lot of people go in the past. And so
what type of company?
I mean, there were many. So the last one was Lavazza. So it was coffee. So Mars Drinks, like chocolate bars, M&Ms. I mean, I was there for 5 years. Great company. Prior to that, I was also in the coffee industry. So I was managing, anywhere between, I don't know, 5 to 10 reps. I'd hire them, I'd fire them, put them on disciplinary, all that stuff. Prior to that, it was Cintas. Prior to that, it was Xerox.
Interesting.
So always larger corporations. And so, I think part of it is having that ability to have the conversations and the tough conversations. And if there's a problem, then just be open about it. And I think that, a lot of breakdown happens in the lack of communication and issues with communication.
100%. I'm like, but back then, you so many times you're asking them like, hey, how are you doing with the workload? Are you feeling burnt out? Are you this, that, and the other? Nope, everything's great. Everything's great. And then they implode and like, well, you had like a year to tell me this, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And also like, if you can correct something early on, it's going to be, so much easier, and you won't be resentful. And especially if you're paying for a service too, like you want to pay for something that you enjoy. It's like if my chef makes something and I don't really like a certain food, I'll just make sure that she doesn't do that moving forward. But I'll tell you, there's also a right way and a wrong way to communicate. I mean, I think if it's coming from a good place, and I would just say with everybody you have, like, stay professional. This is your brand. This is your image. Treat people like you would want to be treated. And, at some point you've given them, a few tweaks and a few warnings. And if it doesn't work, then I would just say, move on, and you can do it in a nice professional way. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think you can. Again, going back to what you said earlier, I think it's all transparency. Like the people that I respect more than anything are the ones that can bring a situation to me and say, hey, can we work through this? And we work through it together, right? With two sides to that conversation versus, not feeling they can actually be honest, right? Because again, the couple principles we live by here is we don't put up with gossip. We don't put up with lying. We don't put up with egos, like at all. Like I don't care. I don't have time for it. If it comes in and there's gossiping, you bring the other person in the room, we talk about it, or we just don't talk about it, right? Because
so much easier.
It can bring down your organization and your culture. Before we get you out of here, we got probably about 7 minutes left. I will do some rapid fire questions just to dig in a little bit more into that, brain ears, but I do want to touch on the culture piece. So your brand, your group, your development company, what type of cultures speak to you? Or I guess, what does the word culture mean to you when it comes to yourself as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, integrity and trust is most important, right? I mean, we and yourself as well, I'm sure, Justin, have spent, years and years and years building our brand and building, what we represent. And, I think a lot of people come to me because they trust me. They hear me a lot on the podcast. They feel like they know me. And so if they're like, hey, which realtor do you recommend, or who can I use for a property manager, that I've vetted them, that, they likely have good, integrity or trustworthy as well. I mean, obviously, for the most part, if I know them, I definitely will recommend them. But it is everything, because it's such a small industry as a real estate investor that's out there looking to grow. If you're going to meetups, we really are 1 degree of separation from each other. And so you can ruin your reputation by, it could be one day and all of a sudden everything you've built is gone. So I think it's just important to stay true, do everything with the most integrity and respect others, and, provide value. And I think, in return, by putting a lot of deposits in, you'll get, a good result at the end. So to me, it's everything. I mean, obviously for, the right club, like we are wanting to provide value, we are all equals. Like, even though I'm a founder, like, we have people working for us and we treat them equally. They have all great ideas. We listen to them. So I think it's important. And the last thing I would say about culture is I've been in some very toxic environments as an employee in the past. And I won't say which companies, but I will say Lavazza and Mars were amazing. But I've left 6-figure jobs because it wasn't the right culture, and it was toxic, and it stressed me out to have certain people around me because they were so negative. And I'll tell you that, that can become, a nuisance. And I didn't care that I was leaving a 6-figure job. Like, there was a couple that I just left and I'm like, I'll figure it out. And then when you find an opportunity with the culture, and especially with, if you're doing this, you can create your own culture. But if you go somewhere and you have a great boss, a great team, people that respect you, that speak to you, like a human being, and you're not worried about Sunday nights having to go into the office on Monday. that is a huge difference. And I think that partly why I've been successful in building my portfolio while I was working is I had a great culture for my last job, where I was there for 5 years, where I had a leader as a boss who was also super, excited about my real estate journey, and knew that, this was my future, and ended up buying 8 or 9 of his own properties. And actually I just had him on my podcast, so I'm going to release that soon too. But I'll tell you, when you're in an environment like that with a good culture, you have the opportunity to grow and not be stressed out for the rest of your life around, even with your family and stuff. Right. That was a really long answer. I'm sorry.
I loved every word of it. And I mean, it all stems from the leadership, right? I would say, even if it's somebody that's in the organization that's toxic and negative and whatnot, I think a lot of times that person should have been identified by the leader and been taken out, or is a reflection of the leadership that's there. I think companies are changing. We don't own our employees anymore, right? You work with me, we work together for whatever time that we happen to be together. But at some point or another, if that means that you're going to go off down a different path, what a world it would be if we can be so excited for each other that we can, still have dinner, still go out, help each other grow in whatever capacity we want to grow, versus the corporate culture that we grew up with. Like, you're dead to me, right? Here's your walking papers. I want nothing to do with you anymore. That's okay if it's a toxic person that doesn't bring something to your world that you want to continue that relationship with. But I don't think it's necessary where, there's people, I'm looking at Kyle right now. He launched a property management company recently and he's killing it. I got a message from a random guy that I met years ago that was like, hey, I just want to let you know, Kyle showed us that property. We're going to take the unit. I just want to let you know, he was so knowledgeable. It was such a fun showing. Like, you have amazing people around you. If Kyle just decided I want to quit real estate tomorrow and just do property management, I'd be so happy for that dude. If he made 10 times the amount of money as I made, I'd be so happy for that dude, because I don't think it's about the individuals and my own profits. I think it's about the people in your community, because he may end up plugging me in with somebody that gives me an opportunity. And I think you're doing a great job doing that, Sarah. I think you're going to have people that plug you into opportunities in the future. We have 3.5 minutes. We got Udelka with one more question. You definitely need to connect with Udelka, Sarah. She's obviously a fan, and Udelka is a wonderful person. Are you and your partner in the same line of business? I was curious about that, actually. Are you guys working collectively on projects, or does he have a separate job altogether?
So he's a police officer, detective. So nothing to do with real estate.
Yeah, I'm kidding. So I'm clean. I didn't do anything wrong.
This is more my thing.
That's good. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I bet you his skill set will apply. Situational awareness does work in real estate as well down the road. So we're going to do a rapid fire round of questions that I typically ask every guest. I can't take full credit. Some of these questions came from the John Maxwell. What would be the greatest lesson that you've learned up until this point?
Take action and stop trying to time everything. You will find a decent deal, and it's never going to be perfect, but over time it will become a great one.
Amen to that. People overthink everything, right? They'll get a deal under contract and be like, why didn't anybody else want this? Why did I get this property when the market's so hot? What are your thoughts on that? People overthinking deals.
I mean, I'll say this is how we get deals, is because there's a lot of people that have analysis paralysis, and there's going to be some people that will just take action. So, hopefully that's not you though, right? You're listening to this because you want to do something. And I'll tell you that I've bought some stuff where I'm like, this is like a first base, decent deal, and it's not a slam dunk, but you got your tenant turning over after a couple of years. You can increase the rent. You could do, there's different strategies you could do. You can take that piece of property and make it like a midterm rental, and you can boost your cash flow if it's in the right area. So you're never going to have the perfect deal, because if it's the perfect deal, I'll tell you before, you buy it, it's going to have 10 other offers likely at this point, or likely somebody else will have, a quicker reaction and will be able to buy it. Like, there's some properties I had to buy like cash, or like no conditions, sight unseen within like an hour to get them. So, just buy something that makes enough sense with, the ability to hold it. Because again, the other thing I would say, and I know this is fast fire, but we don't know what's going to happen in the short term. So buy for the long term.
My boy, Matt Kelly, he's on the stream. What's up, Matt? And he says 100%. There are levels to this game, my people. And if you want to connect with Sarah, go follow the right club. Go find her on the IG. I've spent some time with her groups in the masterminds, and they are legit. Thank you so much for answering that question. 2 more questions, and the last one's the most important, but this one first. How has failure shaped your life?
I think that I will make mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes. And I don't look at it as failure. I look at them as like, oh crap. Like, and we've had issues where there was vermiculite, asbestos, and black mold, and it was like a $20,000 thing, right? That we had to fix. So I would say careful with how you define failure. Like failure to me would be not having taken any action for like the last 5 years. And not having gone to to that next step for the bigger, better goals. But I would say separate from that, you will make tons of mistakes. Sure, you can hire a coach, you can hire a good team that will help you mitigate some of those, but there will always be things that will show up regardless. And it's about mindset, right? And so you can learn from them, and moving forward, just don't let it bring you down. It's not the be all and end all. I think with that. Just make sure that you're growing and you're taking action, but you're not putting everything else to the side, your health and your family and your social piece, because that at the end of the tunnel, if you're just focusing on financing and you're just focusing on that end goal, you're gonna have no friends left. Your family's not gonna like you. And so I think that would be a failure, but there's a difference between failure and mistakes.
That's very, very true. I like the way you worded that at the end. Hey, producer eScarf, I want you to chop up all the last answers to that question. How has failure shaped your life from past episodes? Because I noticed as you were answering that, Sarah, I have had some titans on this podcast, and it's constantly that reaction of like, well, what is failure, right? I like asking the question because sometimes people that are in the audience are like, well, I'm scared of failing. And everybody that I've had on the podcast that is doing the things I want to do at the level that I want to do it, they give me that response. So you came out with a gold star for that one. The most important question on the podcast. What can we do for you? Are you working on a project? Is there a podcast or a Instagram account or a group you want me to send people to? My platform is yours. So tell the people what you'd like them to do.
I mean, if they want to connect with me, they can go to my Instagram. That's pretty much the social media that I use, which is Investor Sarah Larbi. If you guys have any questions there or whatnot. Otherwise, my website is sarahlarbi.com, or my podcast is Where Should I Invest? So in the Right Club. It's REITE club.com. There's lots of free content there. So, I don't think there's anything in particular that I'm looking for, but I'm happy to connect with everybody on here as well.
Well, I just dropped it in the comments. So click on that Instagram account, blow up her DMs, give her all the hearts, and tell her thank you for all the bombs you dropped today. Sarah, I'm sure I will see you out there in the wild, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much for having me on, Justin. It was fun.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.